Hi, folks. I've been asked this week a question concerning President Andrew Johnson and exactly why he changes so dramatically from his wartime position of calling basically for punishment, prison, and execution for leading Confederates. Andrew Johnson was known to be a fiery supporter of the Union cause. He's the only member of the Senate from the South who didn't vacate his seat when his state seceded. Andrew Johnson stayed in Washington and remained in the Senate, and is one of the most outspoken people demanding basically punishment for those who incited and who led the rebellion. And so Johnson was chosen as someone from the Upper South, a Democrat who could balance the ticket and help Abraham Lincoln get elected for a second term. And all indications are that that worked. At Lincoln's inauguration, however, there were some questions about Andrew Johnson because he showed up apparently to be sworn in, dead drunk, and had to be helped over to put his hand on the Bible, and he slurred his way through the oath of office. And many people were appalled by that. They're like, who is this guy? But it didn't matter so much because vice presidents really were seen as kind of fillers of an office that really didn't have much practical purpose. And so I think Johnson was kind of forgotten about. No one expected Lincoln to abruptly die, to be assassinated. And so suddenly becomes important what Andrew Johnson's positions are politically and in terms of Reconstruction when Lincoln is suddenly dead and Johnson becomes president. But initially, as your textbook points out, there was confidence among Republicans in the North that Andrew Johnson would be on their side, that many of them thought that Abraham Lincoln had been too lenient in his position in the treatment of the defeated South. And they thought that with so many Americans dead and wounded and such destruction, that there should be a reckoning for the people who had done this. And so Johnson is their man, but Congress is going to be out of session for nearly a year before they actually come back after they're elected. And during that period, Johnson takes over Reconstruction. And then, as the reading explains, he goes from calling for vengeance to basically cooperating with ex-Confederates and declaring, when Congress gets back into session, that the job of Reconstruction is complete. And by that point, Southern states had selected new members of Congress and new senators who, most of them, were barely out of uniform. These were mostly ex-Confederates who were unrepentant. And now they're back in Washington to take up power again. And Congress rapidly dismisses these people, tells them, we're not going to seat you. And then you have the conflict between a Republican-led Congress and the President of the United States is going to lead ultimately to Johnson's impeachment and near conviction. So what happens to Andrew Johnson? Why does he have this abrupt switching of his affirmed positions on Reconstruction? And I think you have to look back into Johnson's biography to understand. Johnson was born into dire poverty in North Carolina. His father was basically a custodian, a janitor, did manual labor, and died when he was 3, trying to actually rescue some of his employers who were in danger of drowning. He had a heart attack. Johnson's mother is basically a servant. She's a maid. And unless you were enslaved, you couldn't really go much lower in Southern society than the Johnsons. Both of Andrew Johnson's parents were illiterate. Johnson receives no formal education at all and gets all the way to adulthood and can barely write his own name. And it's more than that. Johnson, I think, grows up humiliated. When he gets a little bit older, he realizes his status in Southern society. And Johnson is a charity case. Little Andy Johnson would show up at neighbors' houses, and they knew that he was hungry, that his mother wasn't really providing for him, that there was no one probably at home. She was probably working. And little Andy Johnson, they would keep an extra chair and they would feed him. And so people felt sorry for Andrew Johnson. When he gets a little bit older and he's a teenager, then he becomes kind of a troublemaker. And he's this wild, undisciplined, unmannerly young person. At that point, Johnson's mother basically indentures him. She signs the paperwork making him the indentured servant, the apprentice of a local tailor so he can learn a trade. Johnson does learn tailoring, but he hates basically being almost the virtual property of this tailor, and he runs away. And he and his brother, I think, ran away, and there was a price on Johnson's head. The tailor filed legal papers to have him arrested. And so Johnson is a fugitive. He comes back home to Tennessee and then collects his mother and I think another relative, and they walk most of the way west to Tennessee with really the clothes on their back, no money to speak of, basically destitute. And they arrive in Greenville, Tennessee, and Johnson stays. And there his life turns around. He meets a young woman named Eliza, and she saw something in Andrew Johnson, thought that he could be, kind of fixed and upgraded. And so Johnson continues his work as a tailor. He opens a little one-room tailor shop, and Eliza teaches him to read and write. She teaches him proper manners, sort of the niceties expected in Southern society if you're going to get anywhere. And Johnson had been interested in oration. And so he's a self-trained orator. He continues to work as a tailor and is successful. He actually makes a decent living. He hired employees to work for him. But Andrew Johnson is someone consumed by rage because wealthy Southerners will hire him, his services, to make clothing or repair clothing, but they regard him as an inferior. Johnson is not someone they would shake hands with, certainly not invite him to dinner, even after he's made a substantial amount of money and is living in a nice brick house. And so that's the root of Johnson's desire to punish the aristocratic South. These are the people who rejected him and treated him as an inferior his whole adult life. And so fast forward to Lincoln's death and Johnson becoming president. Now the same people, the same, wealthy Southern planters, former slaveholders, they're coming to him hand in hand asking for his help because he's president. My husband, an ex-Confederate soldier, is being imprisoned. The Union Army's occupied our plantation. Can't you help? And this is really kind of a dream fulfillment scenario for Johnson. Now he remembers he's a Southerner. Now he's accepted by Southern society for the first time. And Johnson, apparently it appeals to his ego. He loves this. And then Johnson also remembers that, in effect, he's a white supremacist. And his feelings about race and the proper treatment of formerly enslaved people aligns directly with white Southerners who want to maintain racial inequality. So Johnson's kind of an interesting person. His life is a real roller coaster. During the Civil War, he's hated by the South as a traitor, but after the war, he's embraced. He returns to the bosom of Dixie, and he goes back to Greensville, basically a hero after his presidency. Today, there's a bronze statue of him there. So Johnson is not rated very highly as an American president, however, given the fact that he's almost impeached. Just one vote prevents him being booted out of office. So hope you're having a great week. Where I am, it's getting a little bit cooler now. I will talk to you folks later.